Hey students, this is Miss Reese, and in this video I'm going to go over the Articles of Confederation Primary Sources Assignment, Part 1. There's going to be a Part 2 to this video that's going to be a little shorter. I'm going over the second part of the assignment. So let's just jump right on into it. Alrighty, so the big question that we are looking at today is, were the Articles of Confederation a failure or a success? Now, on Friday, when we looked at this, we were looking at some secondary sources like some videos from YouTube, an article from News ELA. Today, we're going to be looking at two primary sources, and this video is going to cover the first primary source. So the two folks we are going to be looking at today are two founding fathers by the names of Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton. Now, if anybody has ever studied early American history or has seen the Hamilton musical, you know that Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton did not agree on anything, practically. They had very different opinions on a lot of stuff when it came to U.S. government and politics. And so both of these gentlemen have very different views on the Articles of Confederation themselves. So in our first video, we are going to be looking at a letter written by Thomas Jefferson, and he's writing to a friend talking about the state of the United States government and at how much he believes the Articles of Confederation are to blame for that. And that's the one we're going to cover in this video. So what you need to do is you need to go to Google Classroom. It should be under the assignment you're looking at right now. For this quarter, it will be under, let us find it, Tuesday, November 17th. Although, again, if you're coming from a future quarter, it'll probably be different. But it's the Articles of Confederation primary source. So you're going to need to open up two documents. The first one is going to be this Articles of Confederation paragraphs Google Doc. Looks like this. The second thing you are going to open is the Articles of Confederation primary sources. Looks like this. As I said, in this video, we're just going to cover the first part. So the big question we are asking ourselves is, were the Articles of Confederation a failure or a success? So we are going to read through primary source A, which was written by Thomas Jefferson, and see what his perspective is. So let's read primary source A, Thomas Jefferson on Shays' Rebellion. And this is a modified version of the document. So originally his letter was longer and was a little bit more wordier. This one's been adjusted for 7th grade reading levels. All right, so it says, Paris, November 13th, 1787. So that's where he was when he wrote it and what date it was he wrote it. The British people have hired their newspapers to repeat lies about our country being in anarchy. And the world has mostly believed them. And we Americans have believed them ourselves. Alrighty, so this word right here, anarchy, that's bolded. If we look down below, we see that anarchy means chaos, confusion, disorder. So pretty much the British government has been hiring their newspapers to say that the U.S. is in a state of anarchy, in chaos. And Thomas Jefferson is saying that many people believe them, including even some Americans. But let's see what his thoughts are completely on this. Yet where does this anarchy exist? Where did it ever exist except in the one instance of Shays' Rebellion? God forbid we should ever be 20 years without such a rebellion. What country before ever existed without a rebellion? Alrighty, so we see a little bit more on what Jefferson is getting at here. He's saying, okay, other countries like Great Britain are saying the U.S. is in a state of anarchy, but they're only listing off one example, Shays' Rebellion. And as he says, God forbid we should ever be 20 years without such a rebellion. What country hasn't had a rebellion? So he's saying that it's not uncommon for countries to have rebellions up against the government. So he's saying, what? It's not that bad going on here. There really isn't that much anarchy. It's just one little rebellion. That's what Thomas Jefferson is arguing so far. We're going to continue reading and see what he also believes down in the second paragraph. And what country can keep its liberties if their rulers are not warned from time to time that their people preserve the spirit of resistance. Let the people take arms. Just a reminder, take arms means to fight back. Arms is another word for weapons at this time. So let the people get their weapons. Let them fight. The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. It is its natural manure. Alrighty, so he's using a little bit of figurative language here, if you remember that term from language arts. What he is doing is he's comparing a government to a tree. So if anyone has ever gardened or farmed, you know that plants require good care in order for them to grow. So if you have a tree, you need to water it, you need to give it fertilizer and such. So what Thomas Jefferson is saying is he's saying the US government is like a tree. If we want to have a free country with justice and liberty, we need to be taking care of it. And he's saying that your way of refreshing the tree of liberty, instead of with water, like a tree, he says it needs to be refreshed with the blood of patriots and tyrants. So he's saying fighting isn't only like not a bad thing, it's also a necessary thing. He says, what country can keep its liberties if rulers are not warned from time to time that their people preserve the spirit of resistance? He's saying if we want our country to be free, if we want our country to keep its liberties, we need to remind our rulers that we will fight for our freedom. So he's also saying fighting and rebellion's not a bad thing. It's a necessary thing. We need it in order to make sure that we have our freedom. So when he says it's its natural manure, he's meaning it's its natural fertilizer. So he's saying not only is the country not in a state of anarchy, we're actually doing pretty good. This rebellion is just to show our government that we are going to continue fighting for our freedom. So that's how he's going off so far. He ends off by saying, our Constitutional Convention has made too much fuss of Shays' rebellion, and in the spur of the moment, I worry they will overreact. Now, if we remember from class, the Constitutional Convention was the meeting where all the founding framers got together and they decided that they were going to get rid of the Articles of Confederation and create a new system of government. And what Thomas Jefferson is saying here is, whoa, hold on the brakes. Look, I understand. Yeah, we had a little bit of rebellion, but listen, it's not that big of a deal. We're overreacting. We are making too much fuss about it. We're making a decision way too quickly. So, in general, when we go back to our question, were the Articles of Confederation a failure or a success? Well, Thomas Jefferson saying they weren't a failure because the rebellion, which is the big piece of evidence that other people are quoting against the Articles, Thomas Jefferson saying that's not a big deal. That's not evidence that it's a failure. That fighting is normal. In fact, it's a good thing. So according to Thomas Jefferson, the Articles of Confederation really are a success. Okie dokie. So when we go back then to our paragraph over here, what we have to do is using document A, which is the letter we just read by Thomas Jefferson, write a C paragraph, that's S-E-E paragraph, using the prompt, were the Articles of Confederation a failure or a success? So as I just said, we just read Thomas Jefferson's letter where he argues the Articles of Confederation are a success and that stuff like Shays' Rebellion's not that big of a deal. So that's the perspective we're going to be writing from. But let's walk through how we write a paragraph using the C format. And let me open this paragraph in another tab. There we go. So this is how to write a paragraph using the SEE format. And this little burger icon will make sense in a moment. So anyone who has taken language arts yet knows that in this class, we organize our paragraphs by using SEE. Now, the first S stands for statement. This is a sentence about your topic that you are going to prove. You are stating your opinion and you are going to write about it. First part's our statement. The next part of our paragraph is going to be our evidence. Now, our evidence is a quote from an outside source that backs up our statement. So it's kind of like saying, okay, this is my opinion, and this is someone else who agrees with me. By quoting someone else, you make your case more believable. And then the final E stands for explanation. And your explanation of your evidence is pretty much you explaining to your reader how your evidence proves your statement. So altogether, statement, evidence, explanation, SEE. Now I like to describe to folks that paragraph's kind of like a burger in a lot of ways. You can think of your statement as kind of being like your top bun. You can think of your evidence as being kind of like the ingredients in the middle. I'll explain this analogy in a second. And your explanation is kind of like your bottom bun. Now, how I like to explain this is your top bun and your bottom bun, they're all made of the same material. They're both bread. Kind of like in your paragraph, your statement and your explanation are all your own words, whereas your evidence is going to be made of something else. It is somebody else's words. And you have your statement and your explanation kind of cushion the evidence altogether. So we have that. So going into a little bit more detail on our statement. Again, our statement is what we are going to argue in our paragraph. And we get the statement by turning the question into a regular sentence. So this is how we do that. We look at our question and we try to find the verb. Remember, your verb is your action word. Some examples of verbs might be was, were, did, etc. Next, what you're going to do is you're going to swap the verb with the subject of the sentence. And I'll show you what this means. For example, our question for today is, were the Articles of Confederation a failure or a success? Now, where is the verb in this sentence? Kind of doing a little Dora the Explorer. Where is it? It is right there. It's were. So were is our verb, but what were? So what was doing the were thing? That is the Articles of Confederation. The Articles of Confederation were a failure or a success. So what we're going to do is we're going to swap these around, and that is how we get our statement. Our statement then becomes the Articles of Confederation were, and we pick a failure or a success. So as we were just done saying, Thomas Jefferson viewed the Articles of Confederation as a success. He didn't think that there was necessarily anything wrong with them that much. Shays' Rebellion wasn't that big of a deal, so he says, yeah, besides that, what's wrong with them? Nothing really. So what we are going to do is we're going to hop back to our paragraph, and we are going to begin typing in our statement. So remember, we take the question and we swap the verb with the subject. So our new statement becomes, the Articles of Confederation were a, remember we're going with Thomas Jefferson's perspective, so we are going to say they were a success. Boom. Put your little period right there, and that is our statement. So we're this far through it. Next, what we're going to do, Daisy needs to go back to this slide. After we have our statement written, is we are going to go to the E, the evidence. Darn it. Oh, come on. So your evidence, first we need to introduce the evidence. And we do that by explaining, where does our quote come from? A phrase I like to use to start off your evidence introduction is according to. So what you do is you according to, and then you put the name of your source right there. So in this case, we are taking our quote from Thomas Jefferson. So we would say, according to Thomas Jefferson, and then we put a little comma. The comma helps separate who we're talking about from the quote that they're going to say. So we're going to jump on back to our little paragraph right here, and we are going to say, according to Thomas Jefferson, comma. That's how we introduce our quotes. Alrighty, once we get to that, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at our evidence. Now, our evidence is the quote we take from our primary source, like the meat of our burger. So in quotation marks, insert a quote from a different source that supports your statement. A perfect size quote, I personally like to think, is less than 2 sentences long. So aim for about a sentence to 2 sentences, but if you pick 2 sentences, make sure they're short. In this case, I think we're going to be able to do just fine with only 1. Overall, I like to describe to people, your quote should take up less than 1/3 of your paragraph. Alrighty, so in order to find our evidence, we need to hop back over to our primary source A. So what we need to do is we need to skim through here and find what is one sentence that backs up our statement. Remember, our statement is the Articles of Confederation were a success. So what is a quote or a sentence from this paragraph that backs that up? Alrighty, there's a lot we can choose from here. So let's think. I think a good one possibly to pick is this first sentence of this paragraph right here. I'm going to go with, and what country can keep its liberties if their rulers are not warned from time to time that their people preserve the spirit of resistance? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this sentence, and I'm going to copy it, go back to the paragraph we're writing. I'm going to put in a quotation mark, and then I'm going to paste daisies. I paste in my quote right there and put another little quotation mark at the end. Also going to reformat this. There we go. So just so it's easier for you all to read from my screen. So the Articles of Confederation were a success. According to Thomas Jefferson, and what country can keep its liberties if their rulers are not warned from time to time that their people preserve the spirit of resistance? Only little change I'm going to make right here. It's not a big thing, but I'm going to make this a lowercase a because it is no longer the start of a sentence. Alrighty. So we have right now our statement. We have our introduction to our quote. We have our quote itself. So now the last thing we need to do is we need to do our final E. Is this wrong slide? Our explanation. So let's jump into what our explanation looks like. So I like to describe to folks that your explanation, you should pretend that you are writing to someone younger than you. Like pretend you're writing to like a 5th grader. Because while the quote may seem kind of obvious to you, what you need to do is you need to explain it, both what does the quote mean and how does it then prove your statement. So again, we are writing this as if we are writing for a younger person. The first part of our explanation, I like to start off with the phrase, this means that. And then what you do in that blank space is you explain the evidence in your own words. Kind of think of it like you're translating it. So this means that, and we explain the evidence in our own words. So let's go over and take care of that, shall we? Back here. We are starting a new sentence, so we capitalize the T. This means that. Now we need to explain, what does this quote mean? So let's go back and read it. And what country can keep its liberties if their rulers are not warned from time to time that their people preserve the spirit of resistance. It's a little wordy. I don't think maybe a fifth grader would quite understand what that sentence means. So now what we need to do is we need to translate it in our own words. So, and what country can keep its liberties? So this means, okay, and that the rulers need to be warned from time to time, that their people preserve the spirit of resistance. Alrighty. So this means that essentially, if a country wants to stay free, then its citizens need to show their rulers that they are willing to fight for their freedom. All right, let me read this back. A big part of writing is that we reread our process to make sure we like what we have. So, the Articles of Confederation were a success, according to Thomas Jefferson. And what country can keep its liberties if their rulers are not warned from time to time that their people preserve the spirit of resistance? I'm actually thinking we probably don't need to have this and right here. What you're going to do is if you ever want to delete a word from a quote, what you need to then do is put a ... It's called an ellipses. And that shows your reader that there was initially a word there. Because I feel like this flows better. According to Thomas Jefferson, what country can keep its liberties if their rulers are not warned from time to time that their people preserve the spirit of resistance? This means that if a country wants to stay free, then its citizens need to show their rulers that they are willing to fight for their freedoms. Alrighty, that sounds pretty good so far, but we're not done quite yet. If we go back to our explanation, we just did the first part of it. This means that, and we explained what the evidence means in our own words. The next part that you have to do is you need to connect your quote to your statement. So, this is important because, and then what you do is you explain how the evidence proves your statement. So now that we have our quote on there, we need to explain, how does this show that the Articles of Confederation are successful? So we need to go in and explain that. So we start with the phrase, remember, space, capitalize the T because this is a new sentence. This is important because, alrighty, so pretty much what Thomas Jefferson is trying to get at here is that Shays' Rebellion is not proof that the government is failing, but rather Shays' Rebellion is just proof that people are doing what they're supposed to. So this is important because it's important because it argues that Shays' Rebellion is, how do I want to type this? Not proof of a failing country, but rather that U.S. citizens are willing to fight for their freedom. Because it argues that, I'm not going to go with argues, I'm going to go with shows. Important because it shows that Shays' Rebellion is not proof of a failing country, but rather that U.S. citizens are willing to fight for their freedom. And so now what we need to do is we need to connect this back to the Articles of Confederation. So this will be a 3-sentence long explanation, but that's totally fine. The citizens are willing to fight for their freedom. This shows that the article that the rebellion, that's daisies, is not caused by, is not but rather uses freedom, shows that the rebellion is not the fault of the Articles of Confederation and that they are not a failure. Not a failure. That looks pretty good. Articles of Confederation were a success. According to Thomas Jefferson, what country can keep its liberties if their rulers are not warned from time to time that their people preserve the spirit of resistance? This means that if a country wants to stay free, then its citizens need to show their rulers that they are willing to fight for their freedoms. This is important because it shows that Shays' Rebellion is not proof of a failing country, but rather that U.S. citizens are willing to fight for their freedom. This shows that the rebellion is not the fault of the Articles of Confederation and that they were not a failure, but rather a success. There we go. That kind of ties up nicely there. So what I need you to do, hopefully you are following along on your own sheet, is pretty much make sure that you have the 3 parts of this first paragraph on your sheet. We have our statement. So we turned our question, were the Articles of Confederation a success or a failure, into a statement. The Articles of Confederation were a success. Then we introduced our evidence by saying, according to, and we put the author of our source, Thomas Jefferson. Next thing we did was we put in our evidence. We used the sentence, what country can keep its liberties if their rulers are not warned from time to time that their people preserve the spirit of resistance? There we go. And then we put in our explanation. And I do want to emphasize, your explanation should always be the largest part of your paragraph, because this is where you do all kind of the heavy lifting with your mind. This is where you both explain what your quote means. So you kind of translate it for a reader as if you were writing for a younger person. And then we explained how the quote supports our statement. So with the phrase, this is important because. And then this one can usually be a few sentences long. It's often not only just one sentence. But that is pretty much in a nutshell how you write a paragraph. So that's what you should have for this first part right here. The second part of our assignment, we are going to be looking at a source written by Alexander Hamilton, and you on your own are going to write your own paragraph using the SEE format. So you can catch that in the second video, how to take care of that. Otherwise, great job, historians. I will see you in the next one.